Imagine waking up to the news that the largest aerial assault of the Ukraine war has just erupted overnight. Hundreds of drones and missiles blackening the skies, only for a former US president to declare on social media that his old adversary, Vladimir Putin, has gone completely crazy. Outrage, accusations, threats of new sanctions, yet behind each headline lurks a single, unnerving question. Does the West have any real control over this conflict, or are its leaders simply wrestling with illusions? In this video, we're taking you deep inside the tangled web of power, technology, and global economics now defining the Russia-Ukraine war. What are sanctions and military aid actually achieving? Could Trump's unpredictable diplomacy really change the game? Or is Putin's latest deadly gamble a signal that the old playbook has failed and the stakes are about to skyrocket? To answer these questions, we need to rewind and untangle a story years in the making, one where every move on the world stage seems to trigger dangerous new ripples. Let's strip away the political theater and get to the real forces shaping today's headlines and tomorrow's global order. As the world still reels from Russia's overnight barrage, at least 367 drones and missiles targeting Ukrainian cities, the largest wave of its kind since the war began, Donald Trump's astonishing public statements reverberate far beyond the news cycle. On his Truth Social feed, Trump blasts, "I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, but something has happened to him. He's gone completely crazy." By his account, Putin is no longer a master strategist, but a man on the edge. Why does this matter? Because Trump, even out of office, still shapes the conversation and could soon be back at the helm of U.S. policy. He warns that if Putin really wants all of Ukraine, it will lead to Russia's downfall. Yet in the same breath, Trump takes a swipe at Ukrainian President Zelensky, suggesting that his rhetoric causes problems. The chaos isn't limited to missile strikes, it's in the global corridors of power too. But is all this just bluster, or do Trump's words conceal deeper strategic shifts? To understand, let's flash back to the seismic moments that set this powder keg alight. For decades, U.S.-Russia relations have careened between showdowns and handshakes, from the icy paranoia of the Cold War to the fragile dance of post-Soviet cooperation. Then came 2014. Russia annexes Crimea, Western powers scramble. Sanctions? Yes, but the Kremlin adapts, and Ukraine is left in limbo. U.S. intelligence later confirms Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election, turbocharging mistrust. The Obama administration is criticized for a response some saw as timid. Enter Trump, with a radically different approach, one part personal diplomacy, one part alliance skepticism. Trump's presidency was marked by a paradox. More sanctions on Russia, but also warmer words for Putin than any leader since Reagan. U.S. withdrawal from key arms treaties, most famously the INF Treaty, made the rules of engagement even murkier. Around them swirled scandals like the Magnitsky Act and the Kerch Strait incident, where Russian forces seized 3 Ukrainian ships, triggering a fresh wave of military deployments. As Dr. Alina Polyakova of the Center for European Policy Analysis put it, sanctions must aggressively target Russia's energy sector and financial institutions to truly cripple Putin's war efforts. But did the West ever muster the unity or the nerve? Meanwhile, technology became a new front line. Russian cyber attacks, once dismissed as mere nuisance, have evolved into precision strikes. According to the Institute for the Study of War, 2025 saw a stunning 60% surge in Russian cyber attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, energy, water, the essential veins of a modern nation. That's not just disruption, it's economic warfare, waged in the shadows. Across the Atlantic, the EU is drawn ever deeper into the conflict. Its proposed 12th round of sanctions aims to plug loopholes exploited by shadowy intermediaries, focusing especially on high-tech exports. Yet even as the screws tighten, the Russian economy waffles but does not collapse. Instead, Moscow courts new partners, China, India, the Gulf states, bent on reshaping global trade routes and circumventing Western dominance. This year's NATO summit in Brussels brought another round of pledges, with over $5 billion in new military aid for Ukraine and promises of more boots on the ground in Eastern Europe. NATO's language is unambiguous. Collective defense is not just a slogan, but as General Ben Hodges, former commander of U.S. Army Europe, warns, a sustained, forward-deployed military presence in Eastern Europe is crucial to deterring further Russian aggression beyond Ukraine. All the while, the economic war heats up. The West's goal? To starve Russia of revenue and isolate its oligarchs. The Kremlin's counter? diversification, cyber attacks, and escalation on the battlefield. In May 2025, Russian naval actions in the Black Sea slashed Ukraine's grain exports by 15%. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Agriculture, this is no accident. It's part of a deliberate campaign to squeeze Ukraine's economy and starve global food markets. The humanitarian toll rises with every twist in the conflict. The UN notes a chilling 20% rise in civilian casualties in eastern Ukraine in late May as artillery shells rain down. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court launches a fresh probe into allegations of forced deportations of Ukrainian children to Russia, a haunting echo of dark histories. And just as Ukraine's defenders brace for the next wave, Russia unveils a new threat: successful tests of the Kinzhal-M hypersonic missile with enhanced range and precision. The Russian Ministry of Defense touts this as a game-changer, a signal that Moscow's military arsenal is far from exhausted. But the story doesn't stop at the front lines. In Poland, fears of a wider war prompt a 40% surge in troops along the Belarusian border, the shadow of the Wagner Group looming nearby. In the Baltic, Finland and Sweden conduct joint naval drills, sending a message that NATO's northern flank is anything but unguarded. What does all this mean for global power? Expert Michael Kaufman of the Center for Naval Analyses explains, Putin likely believes he can outlast Western resolve, necessitating a long-term strategy of containment and deterrence. That's a chilling insight. If Moscow is betting the West will eventually blink, what happens if it does? Amid this chaos, Western unity is under siege. Europe debates how far to go, how much risk, how much sacrifice. Dr. Liana Fix of Kerber Stiftung puts it bluntly. Europe must forge a unified and assertive foreign policy, reducing reliance on the US and countering Russian influence effectively. But EU leaders are divided, and every new crisis exposes fresh fault lines. Meanwhile, in the US, the 2024 presidential race has catapulted Russia policy back into the spotlight. Trump, the great disruptor, promises he could end the war in 24 hours, yet his public slams on both Putin and Zelensky leave allies nervous and adversaries emboldened. As Angela Stent of the Brookings Institution notes, Trump's comments reflect a transactional approach, potentially undermining alliance cohesion and signaling weakness to Moscow. What if Trump returns to the White House? Scenario analysts warn that a dramatic shift is possible: sudden easing of sanctions, a new round of personal negotiations, or a pivot to focus on other rivalries. This could fracture Western resolve, embolden Putin, and leave Ukraine dangerously exposed. But the opposite risk looms just as large. If Russia continues to escalate, unleashing more deadly tech, tightening its grip on Ukrainian exports, or even targeting NATO territory, the probability of a much wider confrontation skyrockets. Some experts, like Keir Giles at Chatham House, warn, escalation risks remain high as Russia perceives international pressure as an existential threat, increasing the likelihood of miscalculation. And then there's the information war. Russian cyber units don't just target Ukrainian grids, they aim at Western media, election systems, government agencies. The borders between military, economic, and digital conflict have blurred to the point of near invisibility. The contest isn't just over land or pipelines anymore. It's over narrative, influence, and psychological dominance. Here's a chilling thought. Every government, every analyst, every civilian watching from afar is asking the same questions. Are Western sanctions actually biting deep enough to shift Putin's calculus? Or is Russia adapting faster than the world realizes? Can NATO credibly threaten escalation without risking a conflict that could spiral far beyond Ukraine? And if Trump's erratic approach regains center stage, does that spell a return to unpredictability or a chance for breakthrough? The illusion of control may be the biggest danger of all. The economic reverberations of this conflict already ripple through global markets: food insecurity, energy price spikes, relentless cyber threats, and the upending of trade routes. With every new cyber attack, every new round of artillery, and every inflammatory statement on social media, the leash slips further away. So as we look ahead, what happens now that the world's most volatile leaders are trading insults and threats once more? Are we spiraling toward a new version of great power conflict, or is there still a chance for diplomacy, technology, and economic pressure to change the outcome? Stay with us, because in the next chapter, we'll dig deeper into the real impact, economic, technological, and geopolitical, of this sanctions war. Can the West adapt and outmaneuver Russia, or has Putin already set a trap the world can't escape? So where does all of this leave us? The world is holding its breath as the war in Ukraine intensifies. The West's efforts, sanctions, military support, and ongoing diplomacy are colliding with a Kremlin that appears not only undeterred, but if anything, more aggressive and unpredictable than before. Just as international leaders strategize their next moves, they must also brace for the unexpected, because the future of this conflict now seems more open and more dangerous than ever. Imagine three crucial crossroads ahead. First, there's the scenario looming over every headline. What happens if Donald Trump returns to the White House in 2025? Despite his recent condemnation of Putin's violence, calling the Russian leader completely crazy, Trump has never followed a script the world can trust. During his last term, his approach to Russia was transactional, sometimes friendly, sometimes critical, but always unpredictable. If he regains office, the prospects are fraught with uncertainty. Some analysts fear he could ease sanctions or push for a deal that would force Ukraine to cede territory, all in the name of ending the war quickly. That might buy a pause in the shelling, but experts like Angela Stent of Brookings caution. Trump's comments reflect a transactional approach, potentially undermining alliance cohesion and signaling weakness to Moscow. Would such a deal halt Russian expansion or simply encourage new aggression, not just in Ukraine, but across Europe's eastern frontier? The second scenario is escalation that tests the limits of NATO itself. Russian offensives have grown deadlier, with missile and drone barrages pounding Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. Cyber warfare, too, is accelerating, up 60% in the last quarter, targeting Ukraine's power grids and water supplies. Dr. Alina Polyakova of SEPA warns, sanctions must aggressively target Russia's energy sector and financial institutions to truly cripple Putin's war efforts. Meanwhile, Russian naval activity in the Black Sea is wreaking havoc on grain exports, putting global food supplies at risk. The European Union races to plug sanctions loopholes, but Russia's economy, though battered, is still standing, thanks in part to alternate trade routes and support from China. But it's not just Ukraine under threat. Border tensions are rising in the Baltics and Poland, with military buildups and joint exercises meant to deter Russian incursions. One cyber attack or stray missile into NATO territory could set off Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause, dragging the alliance into direct conflict. As General Ben Hodges, former U.S. Army Europe commander, puts it, a sustained, forward-deployed military presence in Eastern Europe is crucial to deterring further Russian aggression beyond Ukraine. The stakes couldn't be higher. The third scenario is perhaps easiest to ignore but impossible to escape: the shadow war online. Russia's cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns are now relentless, targeting not just infrastructure but the very institutions, elections, media, government, that hold democracies together. The Institute for the Study of War's data paints a grim picture, a surge in high-impact cyber operations, escalating with every diplomatic setback or military defeat. Disinformation is sowing division, undermining trust, and making coordinated Western responses ever more difficult. So what does all this mean for the rest of us, for you, the viewer, thousands of kilometers from the front lines? First, the illusion that any single leader or soundbite can solve this crisis is just that, an illusion. As the CP report reminds us, the illusion of control is a dangerous opiate, especially when dealing with geopolitical actors like Vladimir Putin. No matter who sits in the Oval Office, the West faces a ruthless, deeply strategic adversary who views this war as a make-or-break confrontation with the West itself. Policy shifts in Washington or Brussels send tremors across continents, but Russia's goals remain chillingly consistent: redraw the map, humiliate the West, and expand its influence at almost any cost. But there are practical lessons too. First, sanctions work only when they're airtight and universally enforced. Every loophole, every hesitant ally gives Moscow room to maneuver. Dr. Polyakova's call, sanctions must aggressively target Russia's energy sector and financial institutions, isn't just a soundbite, it's a roadmap. We've seen the EU launch its 12th package to close tech sanctions gaps. The US must match this resolve no matter the administration. If you're in business, finance, or tech, be aware. Compliance is only going to get stricter as the West tries to starve Russia's war machine. Second, NATO unity is not just a political slogan but a literal defense mechanism. If you're watching from a NATO country, your safety depends on it. Military aid to Ukraine, forward deployments in Poland and the Baltics, and joint naval exercises in the Baltic Sea are not empty gestures. They're deterrence in action. General Hodges insists, a sustained, forward-deployed military presence in Eastern Europe is crucial. That means budgets for defense are set to rise, and public support for alliance commitments is more consequential than ever. Voters should understand, wavering on NATO is not just a foreign policy debate, it's about keeping war off European soil. Third, everyone is now a combatant in the information war. The propaganda, deepfakes, and hacked news feeds are not just annoying background noise. They're weapons intended to fracture societies and paralyze decision-making. Cyber awareness, critical media literacy, and support for independent journalism have never been more important. If you want to help defend democracy itself, start by questioning viral posts, demanding proof, and supporting credible news outlets. Now, for a secret fact the mainstream headlines rarely mention. Much of Ukraine's resilience, both militarily and economically, depends not only on Western government support, but also on a vast, decentralized network of volunteers and private donors, ordinary people who deliver drones, medical aid, and supplies every day. The war effort isn't just a battle of armies, it's a struggle sustained by civil society on a scale that is rewriting the very rules of modern war. What then does the future hold? If Trump returns to office, one thing is certain: unpredictability will reign. His willingness to upend alliances, offer deals, or suddenly change course could either trigger a breakthrough or open the door to greater chaos and further escalation. Keir Giles of Chatham House put it best: escalation risks remain high as Russia perceives international pressure as an existential threat, increasing the likelihood of miscalculation. But the bigger truth, and the answer to our opening question, is this: no sanction, weapon, or negotiation will work in isolation. The West's ability to constrain Russia depends on unity, strategic patience, and an unblinking recognition of what's really at stake. Not just Ukraine, but the entire post-war order. What can you do right now? Stay informed and skeptical. Support independent journalism. Push for transparency and resilience in your own country's political system, whether that's voting, watchdogging, or simply refusing to fall for the latest viral rumor. The future won't be decided by a headline, a tweet, or even a single leader, but by millions of choices, big and small, made by people who refuse to look away. If you found this analysis useful, share it with someone who cares about the future of Europe and democracy itself. Subscribe for more in-depth breakdowns, and let us know in the comments. What scenario seems most likely to you? Could the West do more, or is escalation now inevitable? Your thoughts could be part of the next episode. And remember, the real secret is that history isn't written by the powerful alone. It's driven by the countless, often unseen actions